Well, I'd like to welcome everybody today to the library for in praise of public libraries, and thanks to Lynn and everyone here. Thank you for being here. We have just finished National Library Week, which was from April 11th and April 18th, and during that week, the American Library Association released a report called The State of American Public Libraries. And the report talks about the great opportunities for libraries in the year 2010, but also talks about the challenges. But let me just read to you some of the statistics, and that might set the stage a little bit for today and the future. As you know, since the beginning of December 2007, we've been in this recession. And it's shown an even greater use of public libraries in America. The Harris survey, which did this survey, the American Library Association Commission, shows that 219 million Americans believe that libraries improve the quality of life in their communities. And this is up from 209 million in 2006, the last time it was done. Libraries last year had 1.4 billion visits, 2 billion items checked out, and 68% of Americans have library cards. So, you know, McDonald's can brag all they want about the number of hamburgers that they sell, but I think Americans use libraries more intensively. 2/3 of the public libraries help people complete online job applications, and that's definitely seen an increase this year. 88% provide access to job databases and other online resources, which you can find here at Brooks Library. 71% provide their communities only free public access to the internet. And that is true in this community. There's nowhere else you can go and get access to a computer and printer and email, job applications, whatever. 73% offer audio content, meaning that you can download audio for free with your library account. And that audio consists of audiobooks for the most part, podcasts and other items. 53% offer point-of-use training in health and technology, and that's especially true here at Brooks, where we've experienced in the last year a 20% increase in the use of our public access computers. And people who come in here need help in using those computers. And 1/3 of all Americans use public library computers. That means 77 million Americans come to the library to use their computers. And the greatest usage of those computers are with families whose incomes is below $22,000. That's 44% of the use is with those families. And in addition to computers, one thing the library does, and Lynn can testify to that, is that we defend the core value embodied in the First Amendment, which is the expression of free speech, and you must have the ability to receive that speech. Because you can express all you want, but if you don't have the ability to receive it with the materials that we purchase in the library, the access we get, then the First Amendment doesn't mean anything. And we've been, libraries have been at the head of resisting censorship in this country, as well as fighting the U.S. Patriot Act, which is still the law of the land, but has some very serious issues with it when it comes to privacy of people and what they're looking at. So I've talked about the opportunities, but we have some incredible challenges here. In the report, it talks about the number of libraries who's had to shorten their hours this past year, and even some libraries have shuttered. In other words, they've closed their doors to their communities because of lack of funding. And many of you know, next year, beginning July 1st, the library here will be open 7 fewer hours a week due to a budget cut that the town has experienced. And we're not alone in this budget cut in terms of other services in town. You'll see reductions in services in other areas too. So that's the challenge we're under. We have increased usage, but our resources are going down. And Lynn will talk about her experience with libraries growing up, and especially with the Kearney Public Library, and the authors that she came into contact with: Alec Ramsey, Pearl Buck, John Steinbeck, Wilfred Owen, and ideas, the civilizations she encountered, and made a difference in her life. And I thank her for organizing this event today, because it came out of this essay she wrote for the Reformer last April on your 73rd birthday. Is that right, Lynn? And then she approached me this year saying, I'd like to do something for the library that would give other people a chance to talk about their experiences. So, Lynn, I turn it over to you. Thank you.
I would like to start again by saying thank you so much for coming out here on such a beautiful day. I know it's hard to come inside. And I know you're here because, like me, libraries mean something to you. There's some transforming part of your life that you probably could talk about for hours that happened because you had access to books, whether it was through a school library or a library. And I spend a lot of time here at Brooks Library, and I just wanted to do something, and I wanted to have other people tell us what it meant to them. So the program is going to consist of is there are 6 people who will speak for a short time on what libraries meant in their life. And then we will turn it over to the audience, and hopefully you will add your story. And hopefully this will go out into Brattleboro so other people will come forward and support Brooks Library at a time when they really need it. So I'd like to introduce first, who's going to be our first speaker is Christina Gibbons. And she tells me she's a former library trustee, former president of the Friends of the Library, and meets her toddler granddaughter weekly in the children's room. Christina.
Well, I'd like to thank Lynn for inviting me today, because it helped me to start thinking about the impact that libraries have had in my life, which is pretty considerable, and I'll just give you some highlights. Maybe I'll start with my present project. This is really present. I'm, like 10 pages into this book called Your Book is Overdue, How Librarians and Cybrarians Can Save Us All. And it talks about how computers and internet technology are affecting library use and library users and librarians. And the reason I'm reading it is that I'm interested, but I'm also going to review it for the library's column. I haven't reviewed books for quite a while for Brooks Library, so this is sort of coming full circle, but I'll get to when I was into reviewing big time. So I've always been a reader. I was born before television. Pardon?
Before you read? You were born before you were read?
I thought you said, yeah, right. I was born before I read. But I was a great reader as a child. And we didn't get television until I was 12 or something. So by then the patterns were set. And I'm sure I used libraries in school, but the first really impressive library experience in my life was in high school. I was living in New York City with my mother, who was trying to support us, and it was an anxious time. And I knew that all I could do was work very hard in high school and get a scholarship to college. That was my job, as it were. And that was okay with me, because I liked to learn and I thought it was exciting and so on and so forth. But junior year, when I was a junior in high school, my history teacher assigned us a paper over Christmas vacation. And that was a little annoying, because I would have rather been having fun over Christmas vacation. But the materials I needed were not in the school library, and she told us all to go to the main research library in New York City, which is the big 42nd Street library. So I get on the bus and I go down there, and you walk up the marble steps between the 2 gigantic lions, whose names are Patience and Fortitude.
I love it.
By the way. You walk across the marble floor, up the staircase, into the card catalog room. This is before computer card catalogs. You get out a drawer, you know, the C drawer they have millions of things there, and it's hard to find what you're looking for when you're 16, but anyway. And then you go into the main reading room and you hand the little request card to somebody at a desk, and you go find a place at a table. Now this room is the size of a football field, and as tall as this, you know, an indoor stadium with huge windows, banks of windows here, and endless rows of big wooden, impressive wooden tables going, you know, as far as the eye can see. And each chair is shaded by a little green lamp. And you sit there until your book comes, and then you read it and take notes by hand, because that's the way we did things in the 50s. This was 1959. But you know, sitting there in that room, first of all, it made me feel like I was in a cathedral. It was so impressive. And I was aware that I had access to, you know, millions of books if I needed them. And it empowered me. It made me feel like, wow, life is full of possibilities and I have access to them. This is fabulous. I remember that very vividly. And I finished the paper and so on and so forth, and got a scholarship to college. And it wasn't clear to me how important libraries would be, or even how my life would shape up. We moved to Brattleboro in 1973. I'm looking around town. It's the smallest place I've ever seen. I come to Brooks Library, I say, wow, a town that has a library this nice, you know, it's probably going to be an okay town. So I got involved in the library. Maris Morrison was the librarian at that time, and I wrote book reviews, probably, I think, about 200 of them. And still trying to figure out what to do with myself besides raising my family. So I ended up going back to graduate school at UMass. I could commute there, use their library, fabulous, open stacks, anything you wanted. And coming back and teaching writing at CCV, and teaching other people how to find books and use books, and you know, this was kind of passing it on. So when I stopped teaching, maybe 10 years ago, I started doing research, which is what I think got started back there at the New York Public Library. Just researching things that I was really interested in. So I did a whole series on the history of reading and writing, starting 5,000 years ago. And then I did a whole series on the history of libraries, which I actually delivered 4 lectures right here in this meeting room in 2008 on the history of libraries. And there was one particular library in that history that I became very enamored of. It's the first really large collection in human history, and it was 2,500 years ago in Mesopotamia. The king's name was Ashurbanipal. I had heard that name in 4th grade. That 4th grade teacher deserves a star. But anyway, he had a library of 1,500 stone tablets, which he had collected on purpose, and he had a sign over the entrance to his library which said, anybody who takes away my tablets, you know, may their children be cursed forever, or something. Very fierce justice if you defaced or removed tablets unauthorized from this library. So this collection, when his kingdom ended and his palace was sacked and burned and the walls pushed in, the whole collection was buried for 2,500 years until the archaeologists discovered it maybe 100 years ago and took these tablets to the British Museum, where they're still, some of them are still being, they're very hard to read, they're broken. But among the things they have found in this library is the world's oldest hero story, the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is a fabulous story, and I'm getting ready to teach that next. You know, sort of one thing leads to another at this stage of life. So I'm really having a lot of fun doing exactly what I want to do. I guess that's the... So that brings me around to reading. This is not my great strength, internet technology and library usage, but it's fascinating, and this woman is a very good writer. And I can see, you know, she gives a lot of case studies of both the benefits and the difficulties of using this technology to help people learn things. But I'll say that in my experience, and I'm very biased, the internet is great for broad access to what's out there. If you want to know something in depth, you still have to find a book. Thank you.
Yay.
Our next presenter is a young man named Jess Kyan. Is that right? Did I pronounce that right?
More or less.
Who's the Community Service Coordinator at Westgate Apartments, where I happen to live.
I was thinking about all the different ways in which, the different ways that I've related to libraries over the course of my life, and how differently I've related throughout different periods of my life. So I thought I'd sort of put that down chronologically. So as a kid, the library was my Mickey D's, my Walmart, my mall. I was the only child of hippie parents, and I didn't get a lot of new glitzy plastic stuff that kids are so fond of. I got homemade peanut butter crackers when my friends got fruit roll-ups at snack time. I got hand-me-down clothes from my cousins who were 10 years older than me. And I craved that new flashy stuff. But the library, when I went to the library, I would get a bag of new, shiny, sometimes even packaged stuff with cartoon pictures and fuzzy fold-out secret pages, and I was in heaven. And the library became sort of, to me, this epitome of the high life of like what I wanted to. If I did really well in life, I would live the library lifestyle. Later, as I got older and began reading, can anybody help me out? Who wrote A Wrinkle in Time?
Madeline.
Thank you. Fantasy books. The library took on more meaning. I began exploring beyond the children's room and discovered that the library itself, the building, was straight out of a Dracula story. Built all of stone and slate, it had huge oak tables and heavy velvet drapes that fell all the way to the floor. The outside was surrounded by shrubs that went 15 feet up the building. And there were ornate carvings all along the eaves. Even the doorknobs, these solid brass knobs that would fill my hand today even, made me feel small and vulnerable. I grew up in a small New England town, and the most celebrated architecture in town were 1700s houses that were all white and had green shutters, and vinyl siding was considered radical. So in this context, it wasn't a great leap for a 10-year-old boy to lose himself in fantasy inside a building like our library. One day, as I was exploring, I discovered a niche that I'd never noticed tucked away in the corner of a room in a wing of the building. And in this little alcove sat a lone chair, a tall leather wing-backed chair, with brass upholstery tacks all over it. And it faced away from where you entered the room, and up against this big stone fireplace in the room. And as I approached the chair, I was startled when a man I had never noticed, or not noticed as I was walking in, sort of stirred in the chair. And he was hidden except for his black shoes, his black leather shoes, and the tip of his head over the chair. And to my 10-year-old imagination, in this mythical building full of stories of goblins and vampires, the man in that chair became the most exciting and scary thing that I could ever have found. And I imagined that if he had turned and faced me, that he would have had no face, or that he already knew all about me, and that he was waiting to seduce me into some evil trance. And for years, this is true, every time I went into the library, I would lurk behind this chair, fixated on the mystery that it held, but not able to bear my fear enough to actually walk up to it, sit in it, or make eye contact with whoever was sitting there. And that mystery fueled my reading of fantasy novels for about 10 years of my life. And it took a full remodeling of the building before I could enter that room without this sort of adrenaline rush every time. When I went away to college, my fascination with the library as a place turned to a love of what the library could offer as a resource. I fell in love with the power that libraries bring, the sense of having 500,000 books in one building and another million or 5 million a day and a half away by mail. I started a 1.5-year long research project. Night after night, I would eat an early dinner, go to the library, and work until 2 a.m. until they kicked me out, reading book after book on these obscure topics. And the process of spending that much time in a library reading nonfiction, I think, creates this intellectual awareness, this feeling of that you can command understanding of almost anything if you have enough time. And I think it's the same overconfidence kids kind of get when they teach their grandparents to use the internet or to surf the web, or it's this sense of you can do anything. It's the knowledge that you don't need to know everything because you know how to find out how to know everything. Anyways, for me, my college library taught me the grandeur of the world and provided me with a sense of meaning and purpose to draw inspiration for greater things to come. And soon after, I found myself living in a city with folks who were homeless. And all of the great things that I'd come to expect from my middle-class world, I learned were rare privileges. Most of all, I learned that access to information and the confidence and power that it brings are elusive things in the ghetto. My neighbors had not been told by their experiences in college that they were powerful. They had not grown up with shiny new books and did not live with the internet in their homes. What I learned was that the disenfranchisement is something that happens systematically, as in systems are built to disenfranchise certain people. Transportation systems are made downtown transportation systems had made downtowns accessible to people with cars at the expense of making those without have to walk twice as far. Housing systems built affordable public housing on the outskirts of town, far away from the jobs that people needed. Communication systems were paid for by everybody. Were providing free internet in white affluent neighborhoods and leaving other neighborhoods devoid of any communication systems. School systems were built which segregated children into pockets of poverty, making it more difficult for poor kids to learn to read and write. The democratic system gave power to a small majority despite a great diversity among the majority. I could go on, I'm sure you all could too, right? As I became more aware of the oppression built into these systems, I also began looking for things that could counteract them. Suddenly, the library took on a much more important meaning. To this transportation system, it offered more books than Barnes & Noble, which was 14 miles away in the suburbs at no cost. To the housing system, it offered legal resources to renters who could learn their rights and organize. To the communication system, it offered free computers with internet to newspaper magazines. To the school system, it offered to help make up for the system's inadequacies. And to the democratic system, it offered to inform people who could manage their own communities responsibly. In my disenfranchised neighborhood, the library was a source of power for the powerless. Now I again live in a small New England town, and the library holds all of the same meanings as in its other contexts. In my town, our library also has a gallery exhibiting art and history to dazzle our children. And there's a strange man in the plaid shorts that chews gum every time you walk in the library, and he's always there to mesmerize scared children. It's a portal to the enormous world for those of us who live in such an isolated place as Vermont. And it's an egalitarian institution that privileges the right to information over the ability to pay. But most of in our little town, the library is the center of community. It's where neighbors meet and talk, share stories, skills, learn about the local news. It's the place that defines the town, creates a common identity, and builds the local flavor. I think a lot about community. I'm a community organizer. And I believe that institutions within a community form the foundation for healthy, happy people. In my community, with the library as its foundation, I think we are well equipped to cultivate happy, healthy people.
I'd like to now introduce two of my favorite people in the world. Known them since they were born. I would like to introduce Eamon and Daniel Burke, who are in the 6th grade at Green Street School.
I think libraries are just great because you can just get books for free, research what you need for school projects. Like right now we have to do a Civil War project on many different topics, and we're just getting wonderful information on stuff we never even knew existed, like the Antietam Creek or whatever, and stuff like that, and where people were and what happened and how it happened. And I think it's just great that you can access that all for free, like even if you don't have a library card or don't have anything, you can just take it for free and you just can figure it out instantly. It's wonderful. Also, my family goes to Philadelphia every year, and it's like a 6-hour drive. So what's really wonderful is to get books on tape so that the whole family can listen to a great book like
Harry Potter?
yeah, Harry Potter or The Schwa, and it's really nice. Another good thing is most of the 6th grade kids, when we get into a certain series of books, like the Percy Jackson series or whatever, and we share them around and then return them back to our school library or the town library. And it's just easy access. We can take anything we need. Yeah.
Well, I kind of like the movies they have, like those little movies like Harry Potter, Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe, that kind of thing. Because like you could just walk in, use your library card, grab a movie, and leave. You don't have to buy it from Blockbuster or whatever. I don't really like Blockbuster because you have to actually pay them. That's not fun at all. And like, do you guys all know what like an iPad is? Those little books, those big machines that have books in them. No idea what they do or anything, but I really don't like those because they have books in them and you just like turn it on and read books from it. Don't like that. It's not as fun. Because like you're just walking around buying like a $600 machine, read a couple books, download them for like $30 each. And you can just walk downtown, use your library card, get a book for free. It's a lot easier. It's kind of ridiculous. And also like trying to, I mean walking's fun, take your cars fun, but not even close. And where'd the cars go? I have no idea what I'm even doing right now.
We're doing fine.
And like the computers, like you have free internet access without even having to buy a machine. And like if you like, I know some people who just walk downtown, like Rowan Hawthorne, he's a friend of mine who goes downtown, uses the computer there sometimes because they have good stuff on there. It's good for book reports, it's easy. Don't have to do anything really. Just walk downtown, head home. So computers are pretty nice.
Did you guys ever do anything in the children's room?
Yeah, well, it used to. In like 5th grade and back, so like last year and back, we had an after-school thing because like mom and dad wouldn't be able to take care of us. We wouldn't be allowed to go home alone, and so we every year we'd make like a little plate like saying Merry Christmas, and then they'd frame it and everything. We just scribble around on it. They don't really care what you put on it, you just kind of scribble. Like, you could draw like a couple of scribbles, say moo or something, they wouldn't care. And so, like, doing activities in there is pretty fun. The little kids are a little rambunctious, and the books are pretty good sometimes.
I can see you.
And I just really enjoyed the library. It's a good place, good part of town. Not really too big, but it's good enough. Like it.
That's good, guys.
Yeah.
That's good. Thank
Well, I guess that's it, really.
Fortunately, since that's a pretty hard act to follow, it's going to be followed by their mother. Marguerite Monet, who is the case manager at the AIDS Project of Southern Vermont. Marguerite?
Actually, you'd be surprised. I mean, Eamon and Danielle play sports all the time, and they're always out and about with their friends, but they love to read. And they have bunk beds, and they'll be up in the top bunk with the light right there, and they'll be reading, and we have to pull the books away from them to make them go to sleep at night. So for me, I was an only child growing up in Detroit, Michigan. And so being an only child is pretty lonely a lot of times. And reading took the place of playmates for me a lot. And you know, my father, interestingly enough, who wasn't a reader, but really found people fascinating, always said to me, you know, everybody has a story. And so that stuck with me in lots of different ways. So it was really, I just loved to read, and I loved reading about other places and people who lived in other countries, or children who had lots of siblings, or, you know, things that weren't part of my world, but it was a way for me to get to know other people in other worlds. And then when I was about the same age as Eamon and Daniel, I was about 12 years old, we moved out to a suburb and had finally gotten permission to take the bus downtown and to go to the big public library down there that I had used as a child, which wasn't maybe quite as fabulous as the 42nd Street Library in New York City, but it was a big, beautiful building with, I don't know, thousands of books, and it was fabulous. And there was also a really fabulous art museum. And a friend of mine that I had just made at school, her name was Anna Steinberg, we had taken the bus down and gone to the library for a while, and then we went to an exhibit at the art museum. And I remember we were just really fabulous. It was just fabulous. We just had a lovely day. And when we got back to her house, I'd never been to her house before. Her father was a doctor, and it was a new suburb that many newly wealthy people were moving into. And her father had a library of his own, and it was great. It was unbelievable. I walked in this house and into this room that was big. It had high ceilings and, you know, the leather chairs like you were talking about, and you know, 2 stories of books, and you know, the ladder around, and I was just like, whoa, this is fabulous. I could like live here. And then he started asking us what we had seen at the art museum that day, and we were telling him about the exhibit, and we were telling him about some of the other things we'd seen, and he pulled out these beautiful art books and started saying, oh, is this what you mean? And I was just like, wow, this is great. But the reality of my life was that I wasn't going, my parents didn't have a library, and we weren't likely to get one very soon. So I had the public library that was available to me, though, so I could go there. And not only could I learn about all these different people and places, but I could fantasize about what it would be like if I had my own library, which is still a big fantasy for me. But it was so much a part of my life. And now I'm a social worker, and I think, again, that line from my father, you know, everybody has a story. And I think loving books and loving novels and reading about people in different places, like Pearl Buck's The Good Earth, and you know, reading, you know, My Eyes Were Watching God, and books about people living very different lives than mine prepared me to be a social worker and to see that everyone does have a story and that that story has value, that you need to be open and patient and willing to sit down and hear those stories. So reading and listening to stories and collecting stories has been a huge part of my life, which I hope it shows that now I've passed that on to my children. And it is interesting that they talk about, and this is part of the thing too, when I was talking about my own family, we weren't gonna have our own library. But just like Jerry was talking about earlier, the one study from, that was conducted actually or funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is so much about making computers and information available to people, and particularly to low-income families. Like those between the ages of 14 and 24 in poor households, 61% of them use public library computers. I mean, it's fabulous. That's so great. And so all of these things that we've been talking about are available to anyone through public libraries, and we have Ben Franklin to thank for that. And so I think that's great. Thank you.
I think I could listen to library stories all day long. I thought I would share with you the piece that kicked this all off. It started really when they closed Wyndham Art Gallery. There's something about walking by the Wyndham Art Gallery when it was closed, and I suddenly thought, what if the library closed? Because, you know, I never thought the art museum, the place would close, and it has, and so I'm hoping, you know, that we all get out there and get our friends to support Friends of the Library, or talk to the select people and let them know that this library is major. So this is called My Lifelong Love Affair with Libraries. My mom made musical instruments at Magnavox. My father was a bookkeeper who took a train to New York City Monday through Friday. It was 1945, the year the Nazi concentration camp at Brattleboro was liberated by the United States. Congress officially recognized the Pledge of Allegiance, and Branch Rickey signed Jackie Robinson to play for the Montreal Royals. I was 10 years old and about to make the most amazing discovery, a discovery that would affect my entire life. Our 5th grade teacher took us to the public library. It was a windy day. We were all buttoned up and hatted, 2 by 2 like Madeline. We walked from the school to the Kearney Public Library. It was all stone like a church. We walked up the stairs and entered the magic door. Several months ago, I was a part of a discussion on values. Where did we learn the values that defined our lives? I've always thought I learned mine in the Baptist church as a child. I had loved the stories they told in Sunday school, especially when they were told with the help of a flannel board. I was caught up in the plot and the movement of the figures on the board, but I thought, much as my imagination was caught by the plots, the floods, the miracles, the Cain and Abel's, had I ever related to any of the biblical figures? Had I ever seen myself in those people? No, I really hadn't. I did learn by my parents' example. They were hard workers, children of the Depression. So I learned not to spend what I didn't have and the value of education. Where did I learn the other values? Back to 1945 and the public library. Definitely, I learned the values I live today in the books I discovered there. That brings me to Alec Ramsey. He was the hero of the Black Stallion series by Melissa Farley. He was a boy. No matter, I could replace him with myself in my imagination easily. For a city kid, there is nothing so exotic as a horse, especially one that comes from Arabia and so lifts you off city streets as easily as a wayward wind. Alec taught me self-reliance. He taught me to stick-to-itness. He taught me the value of friendship, especially with unlikely people. Henry, the retired jockey, wasn't the most glamorous of characters, but like Alec, I loved him. Alec's adventures cemented my friendship with Shirley, another city kid who lived down the block from me. We spent hours, weeks, years riding imaginary horses all over town. We became avid readers, looking always for new names, for new imaginary horses. We could recite long lists of exotic names, Satan, Sultan, Sand. We became hotshot spellers. I was 13 when somehow I wandered into the front of the library. This held the adult collection. It's now 1948. As I browsed the shelves, there weren't many women writers. I could stumble on a few poets and Pearl Buck. I read everything she wrote, but the one I remember most is, of course, The Good Earth. This book globalized a kid who had rarely been off her street.
What was the book with?
The Good Earth. I learned that I could relate to someone in faraway China, sometimes better than someone who lived next door to me. I totally identify with Olin, lived her story. It never occurred to me how strange it was for an American teenager to identify with an oppressed woman. I know now that it was because I knew about oppression. It was unspoken and all around me. It's not surprising I have spent my life learning to speak out for myself and for those who are voiceless around me. Let me not neglect the men. I read all of John Steinbeck, but it was East of Eden, not one of his best books, that gave me one of the tenets that was the backbone of all the teaching I ever did. In East of Eden, Steinbeck uses the Cain and Abel myth for his central theme. For 2 generations, using the letters C and A for his characters, the myth remains the same. Cain is the bad one, Abel the good one. But in the 3rd generation, Cain changes the story. He does not follow the pattern. And I absorbed and believed people can change. When you believe this, your approach to life is one of possibility for yourself and others. In an early English class, I read the poem Dulce et Decorum Est by Wilfred Owen. This was a poem written about World War I by a poet who died in the war. Dulce et Decorum Est pro patria more is translated, it is right and proper to die for your country. Wilfred Owen describes a gas attack and people choking to death. The description is very graphic. So when he says, if you saw this, you would not say Dulce et patria more. I totally believed him and was on my way to pacifism and anti-war marches in the future. When I was 20 years old, someone gave me a copy of The Family of Man, an exhibit of photographs made into a book by Edward Stryken for the Museum of Modern Art. I remember being absolutely stunned by the diversity of the families depicted and also by the commonality. I was completely awed by the photographs and the definition of family. I didn't realize I was going to unconsciously try to duplicate this in my own life. Today, as I look back through my very beat-up library copy of the same book, I am still breathless by it. In the 60s, when I first adopted, it wasn't the thing to do. Adoption itself was a suspect, never mind adopting children with a different heritage than your own. Today, this is much more common, at least it is here in Vermont. My children are now older. In a way, they are my own world family. It is true what the Pueblo Indians say, we shall be one person. True at the same time that we are completely individual. Today as adults, my older son is a dedicated kayaker. My middle son works in our national parks. And my youngest daughter is about to specialize in counseling biracial adopted children. The Family of Man did not deceive me. What my 20-year-old eyes recognize is what the Sioux Indians say, with all beings and all things we shall be as relatives. In 2009, in the 73rd year on this earth, on my 73rd year on this earth, I continue to visit the library 3 or 4 times a week. I continue to add to my knowledge, rearrange my priorities, learn from others, both local and global. I get all this from the Brooks Library in Brattleboro. No, it's not Carney Library, except in my imagination, I am still climbing those stairs into the sacred step. Well, Jerry has what was a surprise to me, and will be a surprise to you.
We're going to try to Skype in another testimony from a friend, Tony Townsend. Maris Morrison just came in the room, and Maris was the director of the library here before me. She hired me as a reference librarian in 1978. And thank you, Maris. And
She's a wonderful librarian in Ukraine.
I did
That's
something right here.
did many things. Tony Townsend lived in Brattleboro from 1973 to 84, and then he moved away. And then about 2 months ago, while Lynn was preparing this event, I get this email out of the blue from Tony saying, gee, you know, I was just thinking about my time in Brattleboro and how much great time I had at the library, and I just wanted to tell you that. And currently I'm the chair of the Jefferson-Madison library system out in Virginia, which is a huge system with encompasses 1 city and 4 counties. And he's also a technology analyst at the University of Virginia. I said, Tony, would you like to participate in this little event that we're going to have? He said, sure, I'd love to. So we're going to try to do it through a Skype connection, project it on the screen here. And, you know, it may or may not work. We'll give it a chance. But it'll just take me a minute here to get the connection going. And you'll be able to see Tony at his home in Virginia. Hello, Tony. I'm going to give it a try, so we're going to start the video call right now. I'll dial in here. Okay.
I see you.
Okay, good. And I think everybody can hear.
All right.
Let me get you on a full screen here. There we go.
Wow.
Tony Townsend in Virginia. What town are you in, Tony?
Well, the town is Advanced Mills, which no one has ever heard of, but it's about a half an hour north of Charlottesville, where the University of Virginia is located.
Cool. So I gave you a little introduction that you lived here in Brattleboro 73 to 84, and you were one of the first people here to help us with our public access computers back then. You did some classes here at the library, right?
That's right. I taught some very early classes where, you know, people would ask, what's that TV type thing on top of the keyboard? The other thing that I tried to tell people was what you could do with a computer, which back in the early 80s was not much. People seemed very interested with it, and I remember folks in the library saying, if only we could computerize our collection, that would be heaven.
So Tony, after you left Brattleboro, you moved to your town. You became the technology analyst at the University of Virginia, a technology analyst.
Yes, I gave myself that title, so I guess I am the technology analyst at the University of Virginia.
But you also then got involved in libraries down there.
Yes, actually, of course, I was one of the most prolific users of the Jefferson-Madison Regional Library here in Virginia, so when an opening came up on the Board of Trustees, I was happy to volunteer. I actually had one agenda item that I wanted to get solved. All I wanted was a sign that said, please wait here for next available clerk at our local bridge. That took 2 years to get. And 6.5 years later, I'm still on the board and I'm having a great time. So, and I'd like to think that it's all my pleasant contact with the folks at Brooks that set me up for this opportunity. So.
Well, you know, I told the people here that I just got this email from you out of the blue several months ago. And what made you think to send that email my way? Was it just you were sending out vibes or something, or what?
That must have been it. You know, I picked up on the psychic vibrations that were coming from up there. Well, no, I was thinking to myself, well, you know, I ought to find out what's happening with libraries around the country, and of course, I never actually did that. I got in touch with you and mentioned that, well, things were going down here, and I don't know, it's one of those serendipitous types of things.
Well, you know who's in the audience today is Maris Morrison.
Hello.
Maris Morrison, oh my goodness, there's a name from my past. How about that?
Hey Maris, if you'd come back here to where I am, he'd be able to see you.
He won't recognize me there.
Well, you don't know.
Yes, he will.
I don't have much more hair than I had back then, so.
So you stand in front of that. See, there you can see yourself, and he can see you. I think, right, Tony?
There we go. Oh my goodness, hi there.
Hello. I don't have red hair right now. In fact, you probably wouldn't recognize me, but anyway.
Well, no, I'm glad Jerry did the introductions.
That's right. Both of us are that way. Well, we really appreciate your kindness in liking our library here in Brooks. I'm still a user, and then I'm the librarian out in Newfane now, so I'm happy with 2 libraries.
Okay, all right. Yeah, well, I was telling Jerry that the Brooks was what set me on this road, and I'm glad we're doing this today because tomorrow I've got to travel an hour down the road to one of our branch libraries who are having their, get this, 10th anniversary.
Yes, sir.
Boy, they're lucky to have you.
Oh, well, thanks so much. Great to see you.
Hey Tony, thanks for your time today. Really appreciate it. And I just want to, we were just talking today about libraries and technology and how libraries are the place and sometimes the only place where people can get free internet access. And I know you know how important that is in your work. And so I just kind of want to show them what the future may hold here in terms of video teleconferencing and so forth. We just need to get a nice big fiber optic cable in front of Brooks here and our
Yeah, well, that's yeah. And when 30 miles out in the sticks, I'll be very happy too. But that's what I've been telling everybody over the past all the years I've been on the board down here. When people say nobody reads books anymore, and I say, well, there's a lot more happening at your library than just books. Let me tell you about that. So, yeah. When they get this technology perfected, Jerry, we'll be right there.
Okay. Hey, thanks, and keep in touch, okay?
All right, Jerry. Thanks.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
My name is Ann Stokes. I live across the river in West Chesterfield, and what is on my mind at this moment, I'll get off it in a minute, is Bill Moyer's last program. It will be next Friday. And I'm sure he spent a lot of time in the library. All his people are so intelligent and so wonderful. Anyway, next Friday is his last broadcast. But this is today, and in today's New York Times, this guy who does these murals in Miami, the reason he started to paint was because he went to libraries. And all he could do was look at art books. He was influenced by a number of artists, including Rembrandt, El Greco, Van Gogh, and Delacroix, whose works he pored over in art books in the public library. Yeah. His name is Purvis Young. Purvis Young. And he's in different museums all over the country, too.
Great.
I'm Nancy Hewitt. I'm Kathy Maisto Carboni's cousin, visiting for the weekend. And libraries changed my life. I was happy when Jerry invited me to come today to watch this program. I didn't plan on participating in it, but libraries certainly made a difference to me. When I was in public school, we were fortunate enough in Denver to have a system that had a library hour during the day, where children just went to the library and checked out a book and read for an hour, whatever they wanted. Many schools don't have that option today. A lot of them don't have libraries, which I thought was shocking when I first learned it. And many of them that do have libraries don't have a set time of the day for children to be able to go in and just read what they want to. Libraries are very, very important. A library set me on my course for graduate school. I just happened upon a book in the Colorado State University Library on linguistics, Introduction to Linguistics by Sally Harris. And up until that time, when I looked at sentences, it was from the perspective of someone in English language and literature. And I only knew about diagramming sentences the way we do in grammar school. And to look at a structural linguist and how he did it, which was back in the 60s and before Noam Chomsky really got going, that just changed my life. And I ended up getting a PhD in applied linguistics just because I stumbled across a book in the library at CSU. So I thought I should share today that libraries are very important, and it would really be terrible if during these economic times libraries started closing. That's the only access, as many people have said here today, that many people have to books and the world of ideas, and they do that through libraries, on the shelves, as well as through the internet, as so many of you explained today. But thank you for the opportunity to participate.
My name is Vida Crocetta, and no one yet has talked about bookmobiles, which was my first exposure to a library outside of a school setting. And it also, everything affects us, you know, when you're very impressionable when you're young. And so at the end of the school year, there was a 2-week period where I was reaching a point of desperation, waiting. I lived in the country on a small farm, waiting for the bookmobile to come. And then when it did come, all the kids would run up and we would line up, and the big van would pull up and you go in, and on both sides there were books on. It was a wonderful experience for the summer. Aside from gardening and climbing the cliffs and commuting with the trees, the books were really the best part of my summer, and it was a wonderful experience. And so I hear about the marble steps and the lions and the edifices, but really in all reality, it could be as simple as a small mobile in a country. And my first impressionable book was The Speckled Band by Conan Doyle. And it introduced me to the first of what became many historical novels. And impressed me so much that I ended up becoming a historical novel writer. And so the library and writing and things like that has been so much a part of my life, and I've enjoyed it immensely. And that little bookmobile, to me, was my New York Public Library without the lions. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Norm Nicholson. I'm Nancy's husband, and I also wasn't necessarily planning to participate, but listening to this, I had a career as a scholar, and then I had another career of more than 40 years dealing with international poverty. And a number of things came to mind. Jerry's point that, you know, the Patriot Act is there. There are concerns here. Everybody has commented on access to the libraries and takes it for granted. I just want to tell you a very short story. My first experience in the third world was teaching at a university, a regional university in South Asia. It's quite a fine university. It was built by Corbusier, as a matter of fact. It was spectacular. It had a very large library. And I was there to teach a graduate program, and so I said, so what textbooks are the students using? Oh, well, they don't have any textbooks. I said, oh, well, how does this work? They said, well, there was a curriculum that is assigned for the year, and that's what they will be examined on. They're expected to read those books, and your job is to help explain those books. I said, oh, okay, where's the list? And they gave me the list, and I knew most of it. So I went to the class, and I started lecturing. Okay, and then I decided I'd do something radical, which was never done. I decided after 2 weeks I'd give a quiz. So I gave a quiz. Results were spectacular. Every single student repeated virtually verbatim everything I had said. Verbatim. And I said, well, that's nice. But why haven't you used any of the stuff that you've read from the books on the list? And I said, well, we've never seen the books on the list. And so I went to the librarian and I said, I've looked in the catalog, you've got the books on the list. And they said, yes. And I said, where are they? Ah, they're in the political science reading room, and they're all there. And I said, fine, where is it? And he told me. I went up, it's locked. And so I went back and I said, when is it open? Oh, it's never open. Okay, why is it never open? It's never open because we can't afford a librarian. I said, well then, how are the students expected to read the books on the list so that they can pass their exams? Oh, they're not. You're supposed to tell them, and then they will write their exams. I said, well, maybe we could open it up and let them have access to the books. They said, oh no, oh no. I said, why not? Well, first, we don't trust the students with the books. You can't let the students near the books, even if we had a librarian. And they said, furthermore, over the years, faculty have borrowed some of the books, and we'd rather not open the can of worms of trying to account for all of the books and have an audit done, because we couldn't account for them. And so one of the things I learned that I think is important here, two things. One, a library is not a bunch of books in a building, it's a culture. It's an institution. It's something broader than just the bricks and the books. There has to be a culture that uses it. And the culture that uses it has to be a culture of inquiry. And I was also told, by the way, that it wouldn't do it any good if we opened them because the books are in English and their native language is Punjabi, and they really can't read these books in English. So I said, well, where are your Punjabi translations? Well, we don't have any. And then I talked to some of the students and discovered, I said, what are you reading? They said, oh, we don't really read much. And what I discovered is they can read and write, but in fact, they were illiterate in 3 languages. To all intents and purposes, they were not using books. They were not using information in order to create a spirit of inquiry in 3 different languages and 2 different cultures. And what they did have was the ability to listen to me and write it down. So the other thing I wanted to say is, if you listen to all of these stories and think about them, the library is what it is because it exists in a culture in which people do inquire, people do argue. And the final thing I'll close with, by 2050, world population will level off, the growth will stop. And at that point, the population of Europe and North America combined will be 12% of the global population. Now, we do know that many parts of the rest of the world are producing scholarly work, computer work of genius, but a large part of it is still working the way I was working with it in the 60s. And if we want to live in a global culture of inquiry, there's a lot of work to be done. And I'm wondering to what extent our libraries can be part of that global process.
We're out outside of the Brattleboro Library, the Brooks Memorial Library, and we're asking the folks in town what the library means to them, and we've stopped these 2 gentlemen and we're going to ask them that very same question. First of all, what is your name?
Cole?
Carl?
Cole.
Cole? Okay, Cole. You know, you've used the library a number of times already. Tell us what you think the library means to you and why it's necessary to keep us going.
Well, I think the library is just really cool because you can get free books that you can borrow for like a month. And it's nice to just hang out here with your friends. Like, that's what we always do after school.
That's great. What's your name, young man?
Jack?
Okay, Jack. What's your idea about what does the library mean to you? What's it done for you in your life now, since we know you're a patron here?
Well, it's good because I get to do my homework after school to get it done and like have time to read. Yeah. Instead of like doing homework at home, and so I can hang out with friends more.
So you think this is a good study area for you and can help you with your school also?
Mm-hmm.
That's good. Are you fellows friends, or are you related? I mean, what is there?
Oh, well, we're just friends from school.
Okay, so you're friends from school, and both of you come here and you enjoy the library services.
Yeah.
That's great. Is there anything you'd like to tell our local government why we should have more library? Any good reason why that we should keep it going?
Well, some people are have jobs that go on for until 6 and the library closes before then, and they need to get a certain book out, and so it might be important to them to.
That sounds important. How about you, Cole? What's your...
Well, I think it's really important to keep the library running because it's just great for all people because everyone is able to come here. It's not just like certain people can come here and we have to you don't have to pay or anything. You can just walk in and you can even go on the computers in there and research if you need homework, research for homework and stuff.
Well, those are really important reasons, and I'd like to thank you both, Jack and Cole, for doing this with us. And enjoy the library. We hope to see more hours and so you guys can have a place to come. So thank you very much. Okay, hi, my name is Vita Conchetta. Who am I speaking with?
Oh, my name is Bruce Conchetta.
Okay, Bruce. Our library has been losing some hours due to funding cuts. And so we really wanted the community to get involved, and one of the ways would be to ask everyone, what is the meaning of the library to you? How important it is to you in your life? And as we can see very clearly, you have a handful of books from the library.
Summer reading, yeah.
Summer reading, which is always very nice. So, what's your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that one of the first things I did after moving here in the late 70s was come and get a library card, and I've been using it ever since. So I'm really glad that we have a library. I'm glad that we have a staff that's as knowledgeable as this staff is. And I think Jerry does a great job at librarian.
Well, what do you think about the funding cuts that has reduced our hours?
I would rather see the community have reduced hours than hear of layoffs among the staff.
Well, we actually, I think, had both, unfortunately. The economic situation has really impacted us pretty badly. Do you use the computers in the library?
No, except the card catalog is on the computer.
Right, okay, exactly. I see, that's excellent. So the library is important to your life?
Yeah, it's a source of knowledge and entertainment, because I don't just read cheap fiction. Although I read my share of it.
That's great. Well, Bruce, thank you very much for your comments. We really appreciate that. I represent the Friends of the Brooks Memorial Library.
Good.
So, we work hard to keep the services going, so thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
I am absolutely just so moved by all of these stories. Thank you all so very much. And remember, talk to your select person, get someone to join, yourself or someone to join Friends of the Library. Support the library.